टीओटी बहुत सारे हो रहे हैं, इजरायली कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, ऑस्ट्रेलियन कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, फ्रेंच कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, एंड सरप्राइजिंगली कोई भी टीओटी अमेरिकन कंपनी के साथ नहीं हो रहा है.
I was telling Ishmohit that if you told me at the start of the year that you will have Truth Social on your phone and you will check it more often than you check Twitter, I would have laughed. There are two things that Trump really cares about.
Last 1 year से India has been probably the worst performing markets when compared to.
But one thing he has been saying since he has come to office is he wants to bring housing costs down. He wants mortgage rates to fall, and he blames the entire thing. One of our best investments is
Hi investors, welcome to SOIC. So in this podcast we have with us Mr. Siddhant Bhandari. तो आपको याद होगा आज से हमने 4-5 months पहले एक podcast करा था where we discussed about the small cap investing कि small cap investing कैसे करनी चाहिए, and we discussed a lot of global themes as well. So Siddhant has a unique background because he also does global investing and he is the CIO at Persistence Capital. And what we'll be doing today's podcast is that कि we'll try to correlate between Indian and the global themes, and not only that, पहले हम इंडियन मार्केट्स की भी बात करेंगे, एंड वील ऑल्सो सी कि व्हाट आर द की मेंटल मॉडल्स व्हिच रियली वर्क इन द इंडियन मार्केट्स. So welcome Siddhant to the second podcast with SYC in the last 6 months.
thanks. I'm so glad you invited me again. I wasn't sure that would happen, but I'm glad to be here.
And the first podcast was very well received, so you should put it in my very.
Because of you, not because of me.
No. Your insights were, I think, really good. Everyone appreciated it.
Oh, well, it's very kind of you.
So to start with, the question arises कि एक तो a lot of people keep talking कि market का क्या लगता है, but what do you think about the market environment? Because we've been seeing some type of divergence that is emerging.
Yeah.
And what are some of the mental models which one can use to do well in any type of market?
Yeah, sure. So first, actually, it's been a year since we've been managing money and Persistence Capital. The fund has surprisingly had a good start given the positioning of the fund. So we're a 100% small mid cap fund. There are no large caps. There's no cash. It's a very sort of disciplined when it comes to valuation fund. I think on FY27 basis, the portfolio P multiple is like 18 or 20 times earnings. Financials are a small part of the portfolio, so it's not distorted by sector. So obviously, this type of fund with 100% small mid cap bias, sensitive to attractive multiples without compromising on growth rate, should have ideally struggled in year one. But surprisingly, we were up about 9% roughly. Nifty 50 was down 3%. NSE 500 is down 4.5%. Small caps, which is actually 60% of our portfolio, was down about like 8%. So that's what I guess we've had a reasonable start. And we've not actually benefited from what I would call as the main factor that has worked in the last 1 year. And if I had to classify it, it would be companies that meet 4 criteria. They are liquid. They are sort of deemed as high quality businesses based on trailing financials. They have high growth and they have very high near term visibility of upgrades. You can run this filter across sectors and you'll come up with interesting examples. So let's start with the obvious ones. If you look in auto, the businesses with the best product cycle are TVS and Mahindra. No coincidence. I think they're top 2 or 3 in the auto OEM sector. So they're expensive vis-a-vis the sector. They're growing faster than the sector. They're liquid and they're deemed as quality businesses and they're the best performing. If you go sort of within the internet space in the liquid part of the universe, I mean, in general, the stocks have done okay. Nykaa has done well, but Zomato has obviously stolen the show because it is deemed sort of the high quality, high growth, phenomenal management, very high likelihood of near term upgrade cycle because of Zepto's challenges. So that has worked in internet. Even if you look in sort of cables and wires, Polycab has been sort of a standout performer. If you look in NBFCs, Bajaj and Muthoot, which have the best historical ROEs over the last 10 years and have very high growth, have again sort of led the rally. There are obviously aberrations that you can find in each sector, but in general, this rule has held through. Maybe this month you can see even like an Apollo has sort of outperformed a business like Max. So it's not enough if you just have high quality business model and high growth. You need to have an upgrade cycle, which is why like maybe Indigo benefited over the last 1 year. Policybazaar maybe didn't do quite as well because there was less of an upgrade cycle for them. So these sort of 4 criteria have sort of largely explained the market move in the last 1 year. But that doesn't mean it's easy to invest like this because basically when you're buying these businesses in general, you're taking this call that it's very expensive, elevated growth, elevated profitability will sustain, and no competition will come in, and they will continue to deliver the goods from a share price performance even if there is no valuation support for 1, 2, sometimes 3 years even. So we don't practice it, but it has worked. And in some ways, our performance is maybe despite not really profiting from sort of this form of investing.
So just a counter to this, like we have seen in 2017, 18, 19 also, there was a divergence which emerged in the market, and it was like large cap, just good growth at any price.
Yeah.
Matlab, literally it was known as a BAP investing,
Yeah.
right? So is it also true to say, matlab, because it's just a perspective of investing, sometimes the larger mid caps,
Yeah.
irrespective of valuation,
Yeah.
because of mutual fund flows,
Yeah.
keep doing well till the time when the base becomes too high and the growth starts falling off a cliff?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 2, 3 reasons why these stocks do well. First, Nifty 50 growth is largely missing. So everyone who says they find relative value in large caps would be well served to look at the growth rate for these companies that are derated. In IT services, even forget the Trump noise. The growth rate is gone. In banking, it's slowed down. Pharma, you're lapping Revlimid in the base. So now growth is challenged. In auto OEMs, until the GST cut, growth was challenged. Commodity businesses, I can't comment on. And then if you look at secular growth stories in Nifty 50, like Apollo, like Eternal, like Trent, where is the valuation mismatch? So because where is the sort of mispricing?
निफ्टी 100 में डिक्सॉन भी डाल दो.
Exactly. तो my point is कि अगर आपको सबसे liquid stocks में growth दिख रहा नहीं है, then fall and you want to buy high growth because ultimately you're in a sort of emerging market, the high inflation market, FIIs who are coming here are not buying for dividend yield. They have to pay taxes. They want growth. And they're not seeing it in Nifty 50. Where are they going to see it? In that 100 to 120 companies which are at scale, which are liquid enough, where you can enter and exit the position with relative ease. And that's why there appears to be no sort of valuation ceiling for these companies. But these things can unwind pretty fast. We have seen this with Trent last year. I think Trent, in the last 1 year, it's a high quality business. It has grown well, better, in fact, than the sector. I think the stock is down like 30 or 40% in the last 1 year because when you are priced for perfection, you better deliver perfection. And actually, interestingly, when we started our fund, one of the first tweet storms we put out was actually a dissection of what it would take for Trend shareholders to make money when the stock was at 7,600 and when it looked like the company could do no wrong. And it was part of the same basket last year. But then you can have 1 or 2 bad quarters. And if you're at a very high multiple, the markets can be unforgiving, liquid or not. In fact, liquid stocks, markets might be more unforgiving because people can actually exit the position without having to experience too much of an NAV hit versus a liquid stock. Maybe I won't exit because I'm worried that if I exit, the stock will fall 40%.
I think we've also seen this in the past with the likes of Page Industries, maybe an Astral Polytechnic also, recent example. Supreme Industries post 2015, 16 between that 3-4 year hiatus, or maybe a PI Industries in a recent example, is that sometimes when the valuation gets too high and the base becomes too big, then eventually you are betting on a greater fool theory कि कोई ना कोई तो आके लेगा इस स्टॉक को, एंड हमें कुछ वैल्यूएशन का फर्क नहीं पड़ता, तो आप लेते रहो फ्लोज जाते रहें एंड keeps basically going up. So I think that's also one of the frameworks to be careful of.
Exactly. You're betting on either the greater fool theory or the fastest finger first theory, which is because it's liquid. I will see the first quarter of growth slowing down and exit first. But what if every market participant starts thinking like this? You may not get the exit at a price that is favorable to you.
Right.
And frankly, if your business is at 100, 150, in some cases, 1000 PE, we understand earnings are depressed and et cetera, et cetera. But obviously, your business is at 1000 PE. Everyone has priced in the fact that earnings are depressed and they will grow non-linearly. So, yeah, that is food for thought, no pun intended.
Yeah, I think that's like good food for thought even for the audience.
Yeah.
Now, second question arises is linked to the different mental models, which irrespective of the market cycles work.
Yeah.
I think one of the mental models that we keep discussing about, I think, is self-help stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes we even discuss about the mental model of convexity.
Yeah.
But I think today let's discuss more about self-help stories. Any good examples ki if anyone in the audience wants to use this mental model well.
Yeah.
So what is self-help story पहले तो simple words में.
Yeah.
And इसके examples across market cycles क्या रह सकते हैं?
Yeah, absolutely. So see, self-help stories are businesses where the fundamental business model is of reasonable quality. Management integrity is reasonably good. Capital efficiency is reasonably good. Growth is reasonably good. I'm using the word reasonably 4 times because I want to highlight that these are good businesses. Are they the best businesses in the stock market? Maybe, maybe not. But they're good enough businesses where the ROE is significantly above cost of capital. Profitability is there, growth is there, management conduct is decent. So any self-help story that you're looking at should ultimately meet these criteria. But for whatever reasons, it could be a lack of interest in investor relations. It could be sort of capital allocation gone wrong. It could be sort of a change in priority in terms of management now doesn't want revenue growth, they want market cap creation. There is a change in their behavior, and this change in their behavior is what is driving shareholder value creation. So it's a good business with changed management or changed management priorities.
Or a change capital structure as well.
Correct. Their priorities could change. That will show up maybe in capital structure. That will show up in whether they talk to investors or not. That will show up in are they prioritizing profit growth? Are they prioritizing market share gain? It could show up in are they prioritizing asset growth or balance sheet delevering? It could be any sort of significant change which makes the 2 3 year forward outlook of the business dramatically different than what it has been historically.
आई थिंक एग्जाम्पल्स में जैसे पास्ट में हम लोगों ने उषा मार्टिन का देखा, फिर जायसवाल को भी रिसेंटली देखा,
Correct, correct.
या जेएम फाइनेंस का एक एग्जाम्पल देखा,
Yeah.
राइट? सो एनी वन ऑफ दीज एग्जाम्पल्स वेयर यू थिंक कि अगर इफ समवन इज स्पॉटिंग दीज स्टोरीज, बिकॉज जनरली बहुत डिसबिलीफ होता है
Yeah.
कि किसी से भी आप इन स्टॉक्स का डिस्कशन करो तो कहते हैं अरे यार वो तो मैनेजमेंट ही थकी हुई है,
Yeah.
अरे उसमें तो बैलेंस शीट का डेट इतना है, बिकॉज लॉट ऑफ टाइम पीपल स्टॉप फोकसिंग ऑन द रेट ऑफ चेंज कि इंक्रीमेंटली क्या हो रहा है,
Correct, correct.
राइट? तो व्हाट आर सम ऑफ द बायसेस यू इनकाउंटर जनरली इन सेल्फ हेल्प स्टोरीज, एंड कुछ अगर एग्जांपल्स के साथ कि क्या नैरेटिव होता है of the people who are against these stories, so that will be of a good help.
So I mean, this is something we've joked about privately. So without sort of obviously bringing any fund manager up, we also have an internal list of, hey, these were the reactions that we heard when we pitched the stock. So maybe there is too much disbelief. We should study more. So the first one is, oh, I'm sorry, something came up. I'll call you back. Both of us have pitched one of these self-help stories to another investor and literally had the phone cut on us. The other one is कि management थकी हुई है. That I've heard many times. Management ने कभी पैसा बनाया नहीं है. That is the third one I've heard. Fourth one is ये देखो 10 साल से कुछ किया नहीं है. Why do you think you are so lucky? That one I've heard pretty often. The first one I've heard is you quickly open up screen and say, see, this is a bad business. Because the ROE is not there, the ROCE is not there, and so therefore it's uninvestable. So actually, I quite like it if I hear an idea being immediately brushed off. Because then you know that your starting point is so low, any incremental improvement will drive shareholder participation in the stock, which will make the stock work, even if maybe the broader markets have not worked.
Right. I think to an extent, even some of the liquor companies as ABDL या Radico in the past,
Radico in the past.
all these have been self-help stories.
Correct. Actually, this is really funny as a side. In the first year of our funds operation, we were looking at क्या index has done the best. और हमारे पहले साल में तो bear market हुआ है, कोई भी index नहीं चला है. I mean, stock market ही नहीं चला है. If you had to guess what index has done the best, what sector has done the best from a sector index perspective, what would you choose?
मतलब क्यों मेरे को शायद से आंसर इसका पता लग गया था, बट वन फर्स्ट टाइम यू आस्क्ड मी दिस क्वेश्चन तो आई वाज सेइंग निफ्टी फार्मा,
हाँ.
निफ्टी कोई भी निफ्टी शायद से कुछ बैंक में हो सकता है, बट एक्चुअली में आंसर दैट यू टोल्ड मी वाज निफ्टी कैपिटल मार्केट.
Yeah, so actually, I mean, now there is no index for internet companies or for CDMO companies that would have beaten capital market companies. But ठीक है, there's no index for that. But capital markets is the best performing index in the last 1 year. And shockingly, if you look at the drivers within that, it is largely F&O. So if someone had told me 1 year ago, okay, the stock market you'll have a bear market in your first year of operations, but you should buy BSE because that is good, one of the best performing stocks in the stock market. Of course, I would have laughed, and clearly that's done well. So we didn't have any exposure to F&O because we think there are a lot of risks. But one of our best investments is actually a capital markets business that isn't even in this ETF, in this index, and that is JM Finance. So JM Finance, a very interesting history. If you look at it, it is the OG, मतलब इंडिया का सबसे पहला प्रीमियम इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक है. जब मुकेश अंबानी और अनिल अंबानी का स्प्लिट हो रहा था, JM एडवाइस मुकेश अंबानी ने स्प्लिट. दे वर द लीड लेफ्ट फॉर TCS का IPO. अब ये जो बजाज हाउसिंग फाइनेंस का IPO था, ये भी इन्होंने किया. तो JM फॉर मेनी इयर्स हैज नॉट वर्कड एज अ स्टॉक, और मतलब उसका बहुत सिंपल रीजन है. ये जो कैपिटल मार्केट प्लेयर्स है ना, जो 2007 का 2008 का बेयर मार्केट देखा है, दे सॉ सच अ ड्रॉप इन वॉल्यूम्स कि मोती हो या JM हो या एडलवाइस हो या IFL हो, एवरीवन लॉन्च्ड लेंडिंग बिजनेसेस. उनका थीसिस बहुत सिंपल था कि यार कैपिटल मार्केट्स में पता नहीं है सेक्युलर बुल मार्केट बेयर मार्केट कब आएगा. एटलीस्ट इफ आई एम डूइंग लेंडिंग, तो माई बिजनेस विल हैव स्टेबिलिटी. So JM, IFL, and Edelweiss launched wholesale lending businesses because they were institutional capital market players first. तो उनका डीएनए इंस्टीट्यूशनल था, सो दे थॉट इवन लेंडिंग वी शुड डू इंस्टीट्यूशनल लेंडिंग, होलसेल लेंडिंग. Motilal's DNA was always that of a sort of mass affluent retail first brokerage from back in the day. Of course, they have a very good investment banking franchise. They launched affordable home loans. अब सबने लॉन्च ये बिजनेस करा थिंकिंग के इट विल प्रोवाइड स्टेबिलिटी इन अ बेयर मार्केट, बट कंप्लीटली दिस बिजनेस स्ट्रेटजी बैकफायर्ड अक्रॉस द बोर्ड. Everyone ran into problems. Edelweiss, IIFL, Motilal, JM. Now, problems for Motilal were more contained because ultimately they didn't enter wholesale lending. They entered home loans. होम लोन्स में 15 साल से कुछ साइकिल हुआ नहीं है, तो आपका कितना ही नुकसान होगा बैड साइकिल में. So they were able to manage it, but the other three companies struggled. Now, the reason 361 and Nuvama are on the capital markets index, but not JM, is because they took a different approach to get out of the crisis. What they did is not that they solved the book. It's not that they entirely got the book repaid. उन्होंने बस कंपनी स्प्लिट कर दी. तो जैसे IFL became IFL Securities or IFL Capital, IFL Finance, 361. Edelweiss became Nuvama and Edelweiss. एंड इन दोनों केसेस में जो प्रॉब्लमैटिक होलसेल लोन्स हैं वो अभी भी बचे हुए हैं IFL के IFL फाइनेंस में, एंड एडलवाइस लोन्स आर दी एडलवाइस एंटिटी. तो उन्होंने प्रॉब्लम को गायब नहीं किया, बस सेगमेंट कर दिया और बोला कि ये अब ये बैड लोन्स एंटिटी का प्रॉब्लम है. एंड ये जो कोर बिजनेसेस बच गए दे बिकेम फी इनकम बिजनेसेस, सो देयरफॉर दे इमीडिएटली गॉट क्लासिफाइड एज कैपिटल मार्केटप्लेस, राइटफुली सो. JM, if you ask me personally, they took the harder way out. They said, "No, we are not splitting it up. We are going to actually clean up the books." Of course, now if you actually want to clean up the books, अगर आपकी book 2017 में खराब हुई है, it will take you 7-8 years to do it. So now 2024 में they were reaching the end of that cleanup cycle. और आप सोचो shareholder के standpoint से 2017 to 2024 में revenue flat, PAT flat, no ROE, and in fact until 2024 last first 2 quarters of that calendar year, कॉन कॉल्स बंद हो गई. फिर मैनेजमेंट का फोकस था ही नहीं कि उनको ग्रोथ दिखानी है कैपिटल मार्केट्स बिजनेस पे. उनका पूरा फोकस ये था, आई वांट दिस होलसेल बुक टू जस्ट गो अवे,
कि मिस्टेक खत्म हो जाए.
मिस्टेक खत्म. तो हमें इंटरेस्टिंग ये क्यों लगा, इन्होंने कॉन कॉल्स वापस चालू कर दी. और जेएम मतलब इट इज़ वन ऑफ लार्जेस्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक्स इन इंडिया, इट इज़ नॉट इन द इंडेक्स एंड देयर इज नो सेल साइड कवरेज. पहले तो मेरे को आयरॉनिक लगा कि आप इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक हो और आपको कोई स्टॉक कवर नहीं कर रहा है, आपके स्टॉक में तेजी नहीं है. आई मीन दैट इज काइंड ऑफ फनी इफ यू थिंक अबाउट इट. बट क्लियरली मैनेजमेंट वाज ट्राइंग टू फिक्स द इशू. दे रीस्टार्टेड कॉन कॉल्स. उन्होंने बोला कि मैं 2 साल में ये होलसेल बुक को जीरो पे ले आया.
राइट.
सो दैट आई थॉट वाज रियली इंटरेस्टिंग. जेएम की प्रॉब्लम्स जो आप हेडलाइन फाइनेंशियल्स पे देखते हो, ऐसा नहीं है कि उनका कोर बिजनेस खराब है. इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकिंग इज अ वेरी हाई 50% ROE बिजनेस. वेल्थ एंड एसेट है 20% प्लस ROE बिजनेसेस. एन नंबर ऑफ एग्जांपल्स वी हैव. उनका जो हाउसिंग फाइनेंस कंपनी है वो एक्चुअली काफी अच्छा है. लाइक मोतीलाल, दे हैव नेवर हैड एनी प्रॉब्लम्स. इट हैज ग्रोन फास्ट. द एंटायर प्रॉब्लम इज द नेटवर्क टाइड इन होलसेल बिजनेस व्हिच ही वाज टेकिंग टू जीरो, एंड दैट ही वाज टेकिंग टू जीरो इन 2 years. और उसमें आप वन लेवल डीपर भी जाओ तो उसका जो बुक है वो 30-40% तो श्रिंक हो गया हर साल. और जो GNPA पूल है, इट इज स्टेइंग फ्लैट थ्रू आउट, which means it is shrinking not because of bad asset becoming bad, because of repayments. So we thought that was really interesting. तो अगर आप हमने जब इन्वेस्ट किया, आई थिंक जेम का मार्केट कैप कुछ 9500 करोड़ था. ऑफ कोर्स नथिंग एज अ बाय सेल रिकमेंडेशन, प्लीज कंसल्ट एन एडवाइजर, डोंट रिलाई ऑन दिस इज जस्ट फॉर एजुकेशनल पर्पसेस. 9500 करोड़ का मार्केट कैप था, 6000 करोड़ का नेटवर्थ था होलसेल बुक में. इनफैक्ट जेएम इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक का जो वैल्यूएशन था इट वाज 2000 करोड़, एंड जेएम ने 2018 बेयर मार्केट में इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक में 150 करोड़ का पैट किया. So you were getting JM's investment banking franchise, which is one of the best in the street. And in fact, मैं वहाँ पे कहूँगा franchise value म्यूचुअल फंड से भी ज़्यादा है, बिकॉज म्यूचुअल फंड में बियॉन्ड पॉइंट परफॉर्मेंस ड्रिवन है.
राइट.
बट कंपनी IPO तो एक बार ही करेगी, अपने आप को एक ही बार ही बेचेगी. आर दे गोइंग टू गो टू अ सेकंड रेट इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक? नो, दे वांट टू गो टू द बेस्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक. दे वांट टू गो टू इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक दैट मुकेश अंबानी goes to. So actually, the franchise has a lot more staying power. You were getting it at 10p. In fact, we tweeted about this. At 9,000 crore market cap, JMP Investment Bank का जो implied SOTP valuation था, that was lower than DAM at the time of IPO. And JM's PAT was more than DAM's revenue, DAM Capital's revenue at the time of IPO. So the benefit of self-help stories is normally joke इंडिया में ये है कि आपको अच्छे बिजनेस के लिए प्रीमियम देना पड़ेगा. This is one way to dodge the India premium. And then the results can be eye-opening. So actually, in the last 1 year, JM is up 70%, 73%. And it has far outperformed the other guys. Now, partly it is because capital markets index has done well, but you can check Nuvama or 360 or Motilal. They've not quite done as well because उनमें company level specifics नहीं है. And I think we have discussed this mental model over the years. So from Glenmark to I think Usha Martin,
अब एक बहुत बड़ा इसका एग्जाम्पल है GPIL का।
GPIL.
तो गोदावरी पावर मतलब ये इंटरेस्टिंग केस स्टडी है। 2018-19 में मेरा एक इन्वेस्टर फ्रेंड है, उनको मिल के आया था गोदावरी पावर वालों को। तो बैक देन दे सेड कि पता नहीं कंपनी ना बंद करनी पड़ जाए।
Yeah.
एंड आयरन ओर का एक प्राइसिंग का साइकिल आया, एंड बिकॉज दे स्टार्ट फोकसिंग ऑन माइनिंग एंड पेलेट्स, तो विद इन 1.5 year debt gone.
Yeah.
Company became a net cash company. Today company has a cash balance sheet of 800 crores.
Yeah.
And now the market cap has reached close to 18 to 20,000 crores.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting part जो I think we keep discussing about self help stories कि अगर किसी को आइडेंटिफाई करना है तो पहले क्या होता है कि इन कंपनीज का जो हिस्टोरिकल रिटर्न रेशियोज होते हैं वो अच्छे नहीं दिखते।
Yeah.
बट वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट इन्फ्लेक्शन पॉइंट्स इज कि एक जो हम सेगमेंटल रिजल्ट्स देखते हैं कंपनीज
Yeah.
के, कीप सर्चिंग कि किस सेगमेंट के अंदर पैसा बन रहा है, किस सेगमेंट में रिटर्न रेशियोज बेटर।
Yeah.
आई थिंक सेकंड पॉइंट विच यू आल्सो कीप टेलिंग इज दैट कि आउटलुक इज मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट देन व्हाट हैज हैपेंड इन।
Yes.
तो जब आप इन्वेस्टर प्रेजेंटेशंस देखते हो या कंपनीज की कॉन कॉल्स पढ़ते हो तो ऑलवेज फोकस ऑन वेयर द पक इज गोइंग टू बी एंड नॉट वेयर इट
Correct. Correct. We want future coffee cans.
ऐसा तो क्या हमें फ्यूचर कॉफी कैन चाहिए।
Yeah.
पास्ट वाले कॉफी कैन तो वो आप एक स्क्रीनर पे या फिर स्टॉक स्कैन से,
Expiry date, right?
हाँ आप स्टॉक स्कैन पे रेशियो लगा सकते हो, उस पे आ जाएगा कि 20% ROC, 15% ग्रोथ। काफ़ी बारी दे आर प्राइस्ड एट 140, 160, 170।
Correct. 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 You can't rely on 15 years of compounding or whatever. My world is an unforgiving place. One tweet and your entire business model could go down overnight, right?
If you had told me in 2021
Yeah.
some of the worst performing stocks over next 4 years will be the likes of suppose Astral Polytechnic, Berger Paints, Page Industries, or some of your likes of Asian Paints or other
Okay.
these businesses, I wouldn't have believed you even for like 1%.
Yeah.
मतलब चाहे मैं लूँ ना लूँ stock,
Yeah.
but to believe that because last 4 years was so good is tough, and this is why investing is an unforgiving place if you're not evolving as a learning machine.
Correct. Correct. And look at the success that this framework has had, I think, for the two of us across sectors. So even if I go, if you look at industrials or metal mining, I think you had correctly identified Usha Martin, Pennar Industries, Godavari Power and Ispat. I think in pharma and healthcare, we had actually both Glenmark, NH, Narayana in some ways. Hotels mein Sami also turned around very sharply once he sold a few assets. So yeah, there are so many such examples, I guess.
राइट, तो आई थिंक ये तो हो गया सेल्फ हेल्प का
Right.
मेंटल मॉडल जो आई थिंक अ लॉट ऑफ
Yeah.
ऑडियंस मेंबर्स विल रिमेंबर नाउ कि दे कैन राइट इट डाउन समवेयर, सेल्फ हेल्प स्टोरीज।
Self-help stories, yes. In this market, we suggest you focus on Zomato or self-help stories. There is no in between.
नहीं, he's just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
Now, just before going forward, as a part of the SOIC membership, what we have done is that we realized कि एक रिटेल इन्वेस्टर या किसी भी इन्वेस्टर के पास इन जनरल टाइम इज समथिंग दैट इज लिमिटेड। तो टाइम की लिमिटेशन को हम लोगों ने कैसे सॉल्व करने की कोशिश करी है कि वेन एवर यूर रिसर्चिंग अ सेक्टर, इफ यू स्टार्ट यूजिंग AI विद इट, देन आपका एक काफ़ी अच्छा बेस बन सकता है एंड आप काफ़ी क्विकली सेक्टर्स और कंपनीज पे रिसर्च कर सकते हैं। So, as a part of the SOIC membership, we have recently added a new bonus that is a SOIC AI investing course, जिसके अंदर 5 such detailed classes हैं, which teach you about how to use LLM from scratch till the advanced level. You will be able to learn how to make valuation model of companies, technicals कैसे कर सकते हैं कंपनीज के, यहाँ तक आप ये भी सीख पाएंगे कि एक कंपनी की वैल्यू चेन को हम कैसे समझें, एंड फाइनली हाउ यू कैन इवन चेक कि वेदर द मैनेजमेंट इज वॉकिंग द टॉक और नॉट, क्या मैनेजमेंट वो अपने प्रोमिस पे डिलीवर कर रही है या नहीं कर रही, राइट। बट AI यूज करने से पहले आपको अपना एक स्ट्रॉन्ग बेस जरूर बिल्ड करना पड़ेगा। आपको फंडामेंटल एनालिसिस, टेक्निकल एनालिसिस, बेसिक्स ऑफ फाइनेंशियल प्लानिंग जैसी चीजें अपने पास समझ आनी चाहिए, एंड डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स को कैसे एनालाइज करें वो आपको समझना चाहिए। सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स दैट इज एडवांस क्लास ऑन हाउ टू यूज AI फॉर इन्वेस्टिंग, एंड साथ साथ एक बेस कैसे बिल्ड करें ऑफ फंडामेंटल्स, टेक्निकल्स, फाइनेंशियल प्लानिंग एंड ऑल्सो ऑफ डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स are included in one of the most complete courses in investing in India, that is the SOIC membership. You can use a limited coupon code that is SOIC AI10 because that includes the bonus of SOIC AI investing masterclass as a part of the SOIC membership. The coupon is valid for the next 1 week and the link to register is there in the description box below. With this, let's go back to the video. Now, just coming to the next part is that there are these global trends which are shaping up.
Yeah.
चाहे हम लोग एआई की बात करें, पावर की बात करें, सेमीकंडक्टर्स की बात करें, जीएलबी की बात करें, राइट, या डिफेंस की बात करें,
Yeah.
राइट, और समटाइम्स इवन शिप बिल्डिंग एज अ पार्ट ऑफ
Correct.
डिफेंस,
Correct.
राइट. So how and also not to forget the Trump trades.
The Trump trades. Yeah.
So how to do this activity कि आप ये trends को where do you see these trends shaping up, and let's pick one trend at a time. तो पहले I think let's start with the trend of AI and power.
Yeah.
Right, so you can take the global examples. I'll just draw from Indian examples.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think there was this absolutely crazy stat I saw recently. I think China has added more solar cells in the last 1 year than I think the US has added in the preceding 5 or 10 years. So AI, what is AI? Effectively, you're turning compute and electricity into intelligence. So you're commoditizing what has historically not been a commodity, which is intelligence. And so the inputs really matter. And the scale at which I think Google, Microsoft, you add all of them up, they're doing $200 billion of capex every year that is self funded. So they're spending money at this rate to build out the ability to offer AI at scale to users around the world. And obviously, that will create bottlenecks along the supply chain. So I guess two bottlenecks that we correctly identified in the global context. The first one was that obviously Nvidia has done really well as a stock, and you can see that they have new products that they're launching, new GPUs that they're launching every year. I think Blackwell and Hopper and so on and so forth. But actually, if you look at the bill of materials for Nvidia's GPUs, you'll see that the biggest inflation is actually in memory. And if you think about it with AI, there are two worldviews right now. One worldview is that every time you want to run a query, it will be processed somewhere in the cloud and the result will be sent back to you.
Right.
The second worldview is that LLMs will become so efficient that they will be stored locally on your phone. Now, that is a debate that I don't really have the expertise to have a good answer to. The second debate is that for AI to be useful, it has to be contextual. Right now, what is an AI tool? It's like giving a genius who is really proficient in a whole bunch of things but has no prior context on the work, a query, and expecting a perfect answer. But as most of us work, we know that human workers get better because of the context. So if you need context on prior things so you can learn from them, again, memory becomes important. So for us, we felt that actually where in artificial intelligence scarcity is being created the most, whether or not you have this worldview that even if it's inference is run in the cloud, you still need memory to store context. And if inference is run on device, then memory at device should explode.
So to be, I think, basically very specific and to make it easy.
Yeah.
So we are talking about memory chips over there.
Yeah, we're talking about storage. Like in your computer, you have hard drive storage, right? And then you have solid state storage, which is RAM. Where if you're loading a game, you have higher RAM, the game will run better than if you have low RAM on your device, right?
Right.
But so regardless, like if you want to store 10 years of someone's interaction, you need sort of solid state storage. And then you need random access memory if you want that storage to be hit with queries very frequently and to get fast results with low latency. So regardless, you need storage.
Right.
Now, storage has been one of the worst parts of the semiconductor value chain. If you look at Micron, SK Hynix, Samsung, there are only three storage companies left globally. There has been a brutally competitive business model. It's a low cost provider who wins. You have to do capex every year, but you really have no pricing power because ultimately it is the computer company or the CPU manufacturer or the cloud hyperscaler who decides. And there's like 10, 15 buyers that control everything. So because of that dynamic, memory companies have collapsed over the last decade when there are only three left in the world, excluding China. Now, obviously, because of geopolitical tensions, no one wants to, and sensitivity around critical information, no one wants to use Chinese businesses' memory chips because
Right.
that's maybe potentially handing over all your information to the CCP. And so there are only these three memory companies left, and they traded at what, like 5, 6 times earnings each. And now they were experiencing like 40, 50% jump in high bandwidth memory, which is the part that gets used for AI, a specific type of memory that gets used for AI. So you could literally buy a business that is benefiting from the biggest, at least that I've seen in my career, capex tailwind globally at like a single digit PE multiple in a consolidated industry with you. And you had proof that, like, if you looked at NVIDIA, different chips, the bill of materials, you would see the memory bill of materials was rising the fastest. And so, I mean, if you look actually this year, one of the best performing stocks in the S&P 500 is not actually NVIDIA. It's not like hyperscaler. It's Micron, which
Right.
is the memory business. And then similarly in Korea, I think SK Hynix and SK Square are up like 80, 100% respectively. So I guess like you could say this is a self-help story, but this is not. This is sort of inflection investing where you kind of have figured out that there is this massive tailwind that is going to lift a sector up, and then you try and find the most mispriced part of the value chain.
I think what I love to call these stories is that कि अगर AI का proxy NVIDIA है,
Yeah.
तो NVIDIA का proxy अगर if we talk about memory है, तो we call these stories proxy का proxy.
Yeah, exactly. So like a Micron or an SK Hynix or something like that.
I think similar to these proxy का proxy stories have been the power ancillary plays.
Yeah.
Because as you put more and more renewable to the grid,
Yeah.
what you need is कि suppose कहते हैं अगर if मुंबई के अंदर सोलर एनर्जी कंज्यूम हो रही है,
Yeah.
तो I'm pretty sure कि मुंबई के अंदर तो लैंड ही नहीं है सोलर पैनल लगाने के लिए.
Correct.
तो लैंड कहीं पे आउटस्कर्ट्स पे होएगा,
Yeah.
एंड देन आपको चाहिएगा इवैक्यूएशन एंड ट्रांसमिशन एसेट,
Yes.
राइट? तो यहाँ पे transmission ends up becoming a proxy ka proxy if more and more power consumption is happening, and especially because more green energy is coming on the grid.
Yeah.
There are at least, I think I was reading this recently, there were like 40% of solar parks are lying idle
Yeah.
because there are no transmission assets.
Yeah.
So if someone's bullish on AI,
Yeah.
it cannot be that they are not bullish on power.
Yeah. 100%.
Because as you rightly put it कि AI क्या कर रहा है, इंटेलिजेंस को मास स्केल पे कमोडिटाइज कर रहा है,
Exactly.
एंड उसके लिए आपको क्या चाहिए? इलेक्ट्रिसिटी और चिप्स.
Yeah.
So I think another example that comes up over here, which I've discussed with Sid multiple times, is that कि because a lot of sources of basically green energy came on the grid, तो
Yeah.
intermittency इतनी बढ़ेगी कि स्पेन में अभी आउटेज है, मतलब पूरा
Correct.
का पूरा ग्रिड का ही ब्लैकआउट हो गया.
Correct.
एंड दूसरा क्या रहता है कि जो डेटा सेंटर्स को अगर आपको रन करना है, यू नीड बैकअप सप्लाई 24/7.
Yeah.
It cannot be कि 5 मिनट
There is no
में
latency allowed. Yeah.
it's like hospitals, right?
Yeah.
The hospital में there cannot be no latency. So similar in data centers. To counter this type of intermittency or to stabilize the grids, I think there are two technologies which have come up.
Yeah.
One is natural gas powered plants,
Yeah.
which is an old technology.
Correct.
But on Permian Basin, जो US के अंदर Texas में है, तो वहाँ पे these things make a lot of sense because shale gas is very cheap in price.
Yeah.
तो अब नेचुरल गैस पावर्ड प्लांट लगाते ही लगाते हो, चाहे ओपन एआई का डेटा सेंटर्स देख लो या इलॉन मस्क का जो डेटा सेंटर है
Correct.
एज अ पार्ट ऑफ स्टारगेट,
Yeah.
तो उसके पास नेचुरल गैस पावर्ड प्लांट्स लगे.
Yeah.
So the entire value chain of gas turbine manufacturers, those type of businesses end up benefiting a lot because of this backlogs which is getting paid.
Yeah.
And second, I think eventually what is also happening or might happen going forward is this entire idea of battery energy storage.
Yeah.
BESS.
Best.
क्योंकि अगेन a lot of times what is happening is that कि solar is maximum produced in the day, पर उसका जो max usage है वो अगर नाइट पे है,
Correct.
तो intermittency को कैसे काउंटर करें?
Exactly.
एंड ऑल्सो इफ BESS comes into play, ट्रांसमिशन एसिड्स पे कम एक्सपेंडिचर होता है.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
That is also a technology that is emerging and we see a lot of players coming. But linked to this, any players that you have seen internationally also which are benefiting from these tailwinds, any examples that you can come up with?
yeah, I think like I heard this on a podcast once, so this is not strictly my thinking, but I thought it very intuitively explained why there's an explosion in power. Like if you think of some percentage of office work transitioning from humans to LLMs, what do humans need to work in office? They need energy. Maybe they get that from food, coffee, tea, whatever. What do LLMs need to produce that same work? They need compute. Now that can be GPUs, that can be storage, and they need energy to run the compute, to query the large language model. And so, in a way, you are replacing the source of raw material for office work, which is food and tea and coffee, with electricity. And that was never there historically because it was historically meant to just be a supplement. Maybe it will still be a supplement, but it is in some cases becoming even a replacement. So that is like a very good intuitive explanation for why power demand is exploding. And then obviously, like in the West, maybe not in China, actually definitely not in China, but in the West, because of countries become wealthier, permitting becomes tougher, there has not been a build out in the grid. So the grid was anyway aging, and now there is this secular demand tailwind that didn't exist. So, we've seen businesses profiting from this in all sorts of unique ways. One is obviously battery energy storage companies. I think there was that company in France that we identified that was doing this. I think they sell technology even to Tesla. The other one, which was a very interesting business model, was a business called Tecogen. So if you look at data centers, cooling GPUs is actually a very big requirement for data centers. If you can come up with a cooling solution that doesn't use electricity, you are actually saving that scarce electricity for running large language models. So Tecogen was one way to sort of profit from that trend. So Vertiv is obviously another really large sort of well-run data center cooling business that benefits from this transition from human intelligence to, I guess, like computer intelligence. So I guess there are many different ways through which you can actually profit, I guess, from this. And the good thing is industrials में बहुत सारे niche business models.
Right.
ऐसा नहीं है आपको winner takes all है. It is not like an internet company कि या तो आप Zomato या DoorDash हो या you don't have scale and you should not be in business. Here you can find many niches and there's that saying, no, there are many riches in niches. So that definitely holds true in this sector, I guess.
या आई थिंक इंडिया की अगर आप इंडस्ट्रियल लैंडस्केप में लो तो कुछ कंपनियां कोई प्री इंजीनियर बिल्डिंग कर रहे हैं,
एक वही
सोलर पंप्स कर रहे हैं, कोई नेचुरल गैस पावर्ड प्लांट्स के जेन फैंस बना रहे हैं, कोई टर्बाइंस कर रहे हैं, गैस स्टीम टर्बाइंस कर रहे हैं. तो एंड आई थिंक बेस्ट पार्ट इज बिकॉज दीज बिजनेसेस आर सो बोरिंग इट डजंट अपील टू द नेक्स्ट जनरेशन,
Yeah.
इफ दैट मेक्स सेंस.
Yeah.
कि अगर कोई कंपनी ग्राइंडिंग मीडिया कर रही है जैसे एआई या फिर अगर जो तेगा वो मिल लाइनर्स कर रहे हैं, मतलब मेरी एज का तो कोई जो फेलो एंटरप्रेन्योर है वो तो सोचेगा भी नहीं कि मेरे को
Exact.
कंचे बनाने लाइक वो
Exactly.
लाइनर्स एंड स्टफ,
Exactly.
right? So that's the fun part, and I think because these are boring businesses, the moment they go into tailwinds,
Yeah.
the barrier to entries are really high, and it leads to like multi-year profit pools being created, and at the end, sub cyclically, cycles come into play, right?
Exactly. And the beauty is that a boring business is always valued like a boring business. But trust me, when a business grows 25% a year, even if you find the sector boring, you kind of want to cover it. And so the transition in multiples from a boring business to a quote unquote not boring business can be a very good way to make money, I guess, in the stock market.
Yeah, I think that stands true. ट्रांसफॉर्मर कंपनी 17-18 में सब कह रहे थे क्या है ये ट्रांसफॉर्मर बना रहे हैं, सब कर रहे हैं, बोरिंग बिजनेस.
2017 was a wholesale lending business.
Yeah.
It was-
Now Elon Musk is getting into trans.
Now, yeah, exactly. Now it's no longer boring.
Now coming to the next topic, अभी तो हमने पावर और एआई की बात की.
Yeah.
अब हम बात करते हैं कि like I was just reading this कि I think last 10 years में there have been more conflicts multilaterally as there have been as many conflicts as there have been in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Because US recede करे अपने role में from a unipolar world to a multipolar world we are going into. So what do you think about this entire theme of defense? What about traditional and non-traditional products, and
Yeah.
how this theme is evolving? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think, and this has been one of the more interesting dichotomies कि इंडिया में कैसे ट्रीटमेंट मिल रहा है कंपनीज को एंड आउटसाइड इंडिया. सो इन इंडिया इन जनरल देयर इज नॉट मच इवैल्यूएशन कि इज द डिफेंस प्लेटफॉर्म फ्यूचर प्रूफ और नॉट. मतलब अगर ऑर्डर बुक अच्छा है, इवन अगर लेगेसी प्लेटफॉर्म है पोटेंशियली, it's fine. The market is comfortable with it. Whereas abroad, if you see the difference in share price performance between a legacy provider, like let's say a Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, and sort of a future ready provider, like someone who is focused on drones, electronic warfare, there is a earth and sky difference in valuation and how the business has even reacted to these conflicts. So, some examples, this is really interesting, but the largest provider of camera equipment to drones. Now, drones are only as good as the vision that they have, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, but otherwise, how do you target them? How do they target their enemies? Is this business out of Israel called Next Vision? Obviously, Israel was fairly early in sort of the drone sort of build out phase because it's a small population country. It is attacked from a lot of different sides, and while they have a very strong army, they can't just rely on humans. And so, Next Vision is the primary manufacturer of drone vision equipment for Israel. And now, good thing is if you're a drone vision manufacturer in Israel, because Israel and US have such a close knit relationship, you can actually, your TAM is not just Israel. Your TAM actually becomes US and all of its allies. Because you can sell into the US and US weapon system generally gets sold to, let's say, NATO, Australia, the four Quad, Korea, Japan. This equipment can even show up over there. So, I mean, this was like a future proof business trading at 15 PE, very high growth margins. They keep making improved and improved camera variants where either the efficacy improves or the volume to value ratio falls or just the weight falls so the drone can carry more payload. And you were getting this business with like a 50-60% growth in order book, phenomenal cash flows, 50% EBITDA margin at 15 PE. So they're a very good example. Now, Lockheed, Raytheon are also very good companies, but share price performance is not as good as this. And another sort of reason for that might be कि अगर आप देखो US में, because it is not directly involved in hot conflict, procurement has not increased across the board. Procurement has only increased in weapon systems that are future necessary. So there is a company called Kraken Robotics that makes batteries for unmanned submarines. That has done really well. Whereas if you look at Europe, is different. जैसे यूरोप में procurement has increased for everything, traditional weapon systems, unconventional like weapon systems, because Europe में hot conflict है at Ukraine, and because Ukraine now, if Europe is getting involved and NATO is getting involved, procurement for Rheinmetall, which is the largest German manufacturer, has actually gone up. So even though they are focused on traditional weapon systems, they have been fine from a share price performance and from a business model standpoint. So abroad, we are seeing two nuances being added to defense stocks. The first one is, are you future proof or not? All things equal, future proof business model should receive a better PE multiple. The second thing is the country involved in hot war or not? Is the US is not involved in hot war, so traditional US defense systems, Lockheed Martin, not as successful. Whereas in Europe, because they're involved in hot war, even a Rheinmetall, which would be the Lockheed Martin equivalent for US, but for Europe, it has done really well as a stock. So there are these two, I guess, extra nuances which make the space interesting. But I won't give everything away, but there are still businesses that are very mispriced. Like I think you and I recently found this like Polish company, which Poland is now involved in this whole conflict because Russia is flying its planes through Polish airspace. And the largest authorized drone manufacturer, which is a business listed in Poland, I think trades at like 12, 13 times trailing earnings. And earnings have been obviously inflecting because they've gone into an emergency procurement cycle.
I think the interesting part is कि a lot of these trends they play out simultaneously in the world.
Yeah.
कि मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि emergency procurement cycle सिर्फ यूरोप में हो रही है, अब इंडिया में भी H2 में emergency procurement cycle आ रही है.
Correct.
So recently I was looking at a bunch of unlisted companies. So like one of my friends, what he has done, कि जिन जिन कंपनीज को IDEX की फंडिंग मिली है,
Yeah.
जहाँ पे इंडियन गवर्नमेंट का बेसिकली स्टार्टअप फंड होता है. सपोज इंडियन गवर्नमेंट सिलेक्ट्स अ प्रोजेक्ट,
Yeah.
तो दे विल गिव यू अ टोकन फंड 3-4-5 करोड़ रुपए
Yeah.
का. एंड अगर आपको फंडिंग मिलने के बाद AN मिल जाए, दैट इज एक्सेप्टेंस ऑफ नेसेसिटी,
Yeah.
तो आपके लिए बजट में उस पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट के लिए यू विल हैव बजटरी एलोकेशन.
Right.
So you know कि there is a higher degree of chances that you might achieve success over there.
Yeah.
So that's the fascinating part to see कि जब DAP आया था इंडिया में, that is basically Defense Acquisition Procedure and Program, तो उसमें ये मैंडेट आया कि कुछ-कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स में 40% इंडिजिनाइजेशन होनी चाहिए, कुछ में 60% होनी चाहिए.
Yeah.
एंड देयर वाज अ इम्पोर्ट लिस्ट एंड अ पॉजिटिव इम्पोर्ट लिस्ट जिसमें 2000 प्रोडक्ट्स थे
Yeah.
कि इनको अब हम जब भी प्रोक्योर करेंगे तो वील बी प्रोक्योरिंग इट वाया द इंडियन वेंडर्स ओनली,
Okay.
नॉट वाया द फॉरेन वेंडर्स. These things are required for, I think, ecosystem creation.
Of course. Yeah.
And that has started happening. And I think there have been more than 200 companies which got the IDEX funding
Yeah.
recently. And कैसे products कर रहे हैं? There is a company which is just focusing on radars.
Yeah.
There's a company which is just focusing on infrared vision,
Yeah.
right? Then I recently looked at a company which is just focusing on logistics drones.
Yeah.
Then there's a company which is just focusing on testing and pilot drones.
Yeah.
मतलब pilot drones भी होते हैं.
Yeah.
Pilot drones क्या होते हैं कि suppose if you want to test your missiles,
Yeah.
right? Or suppose if you want to blow up a drone.
Huh.
So if you take a real drone, then that will cost like 5-10 crore rupees, right?
So you get a cheaper door.
So you get a cheaper replica, and then there is only 1 or 2 companies in those tenders.
Oh, interesting.
So a fascinating space where I think एक प्रोडक्ट में एक 2-2 कंपनीज के साथ बिजनेसेस बने हैं. जैसे एक शिप बिल्डिंग में कंपनी है जो बल बार्स के अंदर है और शिप के ऊपर एक बल बार लगते हैं,
Right.
तो उसमें 2 कंपनियां पूरी इंडस्ट्री के अंदर.
Yeah.
Then there's a company which is into HVAC systems for submarines and ships,
Yeah.
like HVAC systems
Yeah.
में अब उसमें 5 साल का टेस्टिंग टाइम पीरियड है.
Yeah.
So that's the fascinating part, and I think abroad you've been studying these companies like this. Next Vision का example दिया, Polish drone वाले का example दिया.
Correct. Correct.
तो a lot of similarities, जैसे हमने power में discuss करा, niches हैं.
Yeah.
There are riches in niches.
Yeah.
Similar to this, I think defense industry में we also find such type of plays happening.
Yeah, and I think actually it is very important that Indian investors take some time to study the Israeli defense ecosystem,
Yeah.
because the procurement model in India until very recently was, Indian soldiers' lives are very valuable. We're not playing with their life, so we have to buy the best for our boys. And so, obviously, if you don't have a burgeoning domestic ecosystem, you will buy weapons from overseas because obviously that ecosystem is more mature, so obviously the weapons are better. I think where the Indian government has changed its stance is we will make the best for our boys. So they're saying that it's okay if today they don't have the best of the best, but if we force domestic procurement, because obviously the nation is patriotic, any defense entrepreneur is probably more patriotic than the average, even Indian, I would say, we will eventually get there, like where we have gotten in other sectors. And in this, there's that book, I think, that Joe Stadwell wrote on how what makes Asian economies competitive. It's not enough that you manufacture, you have to export.
Yeah.
That's how you get global competitiveness. So maybe the view that the Indian government has is that you will be forced to be globally competitive because your opponent might be buying products from across the world. And so, if you have to win that hot war, you have to have your defense equipment be equally competitive with something manufactured in maybe a perhaps a richer country. And so, I think that change has also just completely opened up the sector. And actually, that change has come from Israel, because how did Israel, which is a country that was only founded 50 years ago, doesn't have any natural resources, our population is tiny, how do they come up with so many defensive systems? Because they took this ecosystem approach that I think India is very wise actually to learn from.
So you brought up Israel, तो इसमें भी एक fascinating insight है कि जो recently एक defense expo पे I was just chatting with people.
Yeah.
One of the companies which like I've been looking at, तो I was just talking to him कि यार ये Israeli companies के साथ आपका इतना TOT क्यों हो रहा है?
हाँ.
Because technology transfer agreements हो रहे हैं. तो he told me that he was talking to an Israeli company, जैसे Elbit के बहुत सारे joint ventures हो रहे हैं इंडिया में, तो Elbit is the largest in Israel I think.
Yeah.
So he said कि what he told me was very fascinating कि अगर आप इसराइल से लेके ऑस्ट्रेलिया तक देखते हो,
हाँ.
so there is only one country that is friendly to Israel.
Well, that's actually very interesting. Yeah.
That was so fascinating.
Yeah, that's exactly very fascinating.
So they've been coming more and more and doing JV with the Indian partners.
Yeah, which is actually good for us.
Yeah, and it's good for the defense ecosystem. तो TOT बहुत सारे हो रहे हैं, इजरायली कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, ऑस्ट्रेलियन कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, फ्रेंच कंपनीज के साथ हो रहे हैं, एंड सरप्राइजिंगली कोई भी TOT अमेरिकन कंपनी के साथ नहीं हो रहा है इस टाइम पे.
Whoa, I mean, we can get into why, but I don't know.
Which brings me up to the next topic.
Yeah,
Our discussion.
Yeah. Trump trades.
Trump trades.
Yeah. So it's very unfortunate, but we're only 1 year, or not even 1 year into the Trump presidency. We have 3 more years to go. I was telling Ishmohit that if you told me at the start of the year that you will have Truth Social on your phone and you will check it more often than you check Twitter, I would have laughed, but that is the reality. Anyway, Trump can move markets. Staying in India, we've kind of only seen the side of him moving markets where it's not been favorable to us. But obviously, if you have the ability to invest globally, Trump can actually be a friend as well. In fact, he regularly tweets when the market hits all-time high. He often tells his constituency or whatever US citizens to not be panicants, but to just buy the S&P 500 and chill.
I think एक मैंने tweet देखा था where he put a meme that bought Intel at $20, now it's at $30.
Correct, exactly. And so yeah, and there are two things that Trump really cares about. So this goes into how to make money by sort of following Trump. This is not a foolproof policy. With everything Trump does, he often changes his mind. Obviously, this is not investment advice. And like 10 times more so with Trump, nothing is for certain. So take this more for like the framework than the actual ideas. But one thing he has been saying since he has come to office is he wants to bring housing costs down. He wants mortgage rates to fall. And he blames the entire thing on too late Jerome Powell, who's the US chairman of the Fed. And so there are obviously stocks that really benefit, that can enable him to do this and that correspondingly benefit from him doing this. So we'll give one example of each. So Fannie Mae is a stock that can actually help him bring down housing cost. Right now, there's a cap on GSE. So GSE is the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are GSEs. So government-sponsored enterprises. So they're quasi PSUs, but they're meant to be converted back to private businesses. There's a cap on how much mortgage-backed securities they can buy. If that cap gets lifted or it gets extended, then the demand for mortgage-backed securities structurally will go up, which will again help in bringing down the cost of home loans, because then a bank can be more confident on originating lower cost home loans because they won't hold them on the books. They'll sell them to a GSE and the GSE can hold more home loans than it could before. So Trump is obviously trying really hard to make that happen. One way to make that happen is to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac listed and remove all of these constraints that were put to them after they went insolvent in the 2008 crisis. And so he even put out a meme saying that it will be the great American IPO with a $500 billion sort of market cap. I mean, whatever you tell about Trump, his social media game is really good. So this is one way to profit on it. And if you look at the businesses, they're up to 300% this year. Another way to profit is that, okay, if mortgage rates fall, a lot of people who are locked in at like a 6%, 6.5% mortgage rate, they may want to refinance down to 5.5, 5, 4.5%. So the largest mortgage originator in the country is Rocket Mortgages. It's a founder-led business. It's at like 15, 16 times forward earnings. But forget the forward earnings multiple because it's completely driven by your outlook on how much refinancing will occur next year.
Right.
Now, as the president has said that his open mandate is to bring down the cost of housing, it's literally everything he's doing when he's making fun of Jerome Powell is to make this stock in a way work, because if mortgage rates fall, refinancing goes up. So that is sort of one example of like Trump trades, which is housing cost is a very big priority for him. Another example of something that's a big priority for him is US semiconductor sort of supply chain stability. And so he is very pissed with the fact that all the semis get manufactured by TSMC in Taiwan. He forced them in term one to actually go to Arizona. It's not enough. He recently took a 10% stake in Intel, received a lot of backlash because US is the definition of free markets. वहाँ पे PSU नाम की कोई चीज़ नहीं है. So the fact that the government unilaterally took a position in a private company obviously raised eyebrows. But the fact of the matter is that he wants Intel to become an independent foundry business like TSMC. And he's willing to throw the weight of the world's biggest sort of economy behind it. And if you look at Intel's entire market cap, it might be 130 billion. And it obviously has its own CPU business where they're pretty good. And they have a foundry business within it. And it trades at obviously a joke multiple compared to some of the other semis businesses. So again, he tweeted about it recently, $20 to $30. Um, so yeah, I mean, those are two examples. There are minor examples also. So Sydney Sweeney did an ad for American Eagle. It was supposed to be a pushback to the woke agenda where they wanted sort of a more conventional looking sort of model for American Eagle. Someone asked Trump about that, and he said, "Oh, I found out she's a Republican, so now I support it." And then that drove more views and visits to, I guess, the website of American Eagle. So that's obviously a joke and less of a serious example, but it goes to show, I mean, how interested he is in his ability to move markets.
I think, and also the interesting part is ki, as we say, ki opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
There is also another trade which is the taco trade
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly. that Trump always gets. So I think like जैसे Nvidia पे इतनी बारी बैन मारा कि चाइना पे आप एक्सपोर्ट नहीं कर सकते, and all of a sudden the thing started improving. या फिर ट्रेड रिलेशन किसी कंट्री के साथ खराब होते हैं, then all of a sudden the trade relations start improving.
Correct.
That's also I think the funny end of the other spectrum. पहले इंटेल के सीईओ को इतना उल्टा
Boss, exactly.
and then बाद में लिखा कि नहीं नहीं, what a great person he is. Once he offered like 10% or 20% stake in his company.
Correct.
Kind of amazing. First time in this world we are seeing such things happening.
Actually, Nvidia might be the best example. First, they were banned from selling H20s to China. Then they were asked to sell watered down H20s, a type of chip. Then it was a watered down version. Then there was a cap on how much they could sell. And it finally ended with Nvidia has been, it's not being tariffed because it's an American company, but they have to pay an export tax to sell to China, which is literally unconstitutional as per like whatever US law, but it's still happening. So 4 times on his own strategic priority, he changed his mind.
And final round mein China banned Nvidia chips.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think in today's podcast, I think we learned a lot about different trends which are happening in the world. We spoke about defense, AI, power, and also the Trump thing. And we spoke about general market outlook. And also we discussed the self-help model. But before we go, Sid, I think a lot of investors or a lot of like investors who watch SYC channel,
Yeah.
they have this question in mind ki last 1 year say India has been probably the worst performing markets
Yeah.
when compared to even the Korean index where the population is degrowing, or the Japanese index which is at all-time highs, or S&P 500 मतलब or China, and China has also been doing really well. So what do you think, what holds for the Indian markets over the medium term, because this has been the first time at least that I've been witnessing कि इतना बड़ा divergence create हो गया.
Yeah, and by the way, this divergence is a local currency. Then even Indian FX has underperformed all these countries.
Right.
So India has depreciated 10% against yen just in the last 1 year. So my view is that you could blame part of why we launched the fund with limited amount of capital is because we were unsure on where the markets would go in the near term, given the valuations were not comfortable. So you start off with high multiples, and growth was really slow the last 1 year. I mean, the government has cut taxes for middle class Indians or middle income Indians. They've recently cut GST. Rates have been cut. You don't do all this if the economy is doing better. So the economy was slowing down and multiples were high. And for some of these other countries, multiples were low. And maybe the economy didn't improve, but in cases of Korea, the president would go on TV and say, I need Korean stocks to trade at book value. And you were rewarded as a stock if you were doing buybacks and trying to create shareholder value, not just through operating performance, but also through financial engineering, buybacks, dividends, so on and so forth. So I think both of these things led to India underperforming, but now we are seeing tax cut direct and indirect, right? On consumption tax and on income tax. Underperformance has also sort of meant that the valuation spread between India and like some of these other markets has sort of collapsed. So who can sort of predict the future? But perhaps it won't be this divergent in the future. But anyway, we are focused on finding self-help flows. Our job is to deliver returns even in a low return environment. And I guess so far in a low return environment, only two things have worked: high valuation stocks or self help stories. So we are focused on the one which offers more margin of safety from a 2 3 year perspective.
Right, right. So let's see. I think hopefully the future days are better when it comes to the broader markets as well.
Yeah.
And such type of divergences usually mean revert.
Yeah.
Because इतना तो इंडिया का आई थिंक जो प्रीमियम था वो एकदम अभी नैरोएस्ट हो गया लास्ट 10-15 ईयर्स में MSCI इंडेक्स में जो बाकी इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स के साथ देखें
FII ownership is at decadal lows.
या
What if it returns?
दैट इज आल्सो पॉसिबल.
All it takes is cut maybe FII tax to zero. We're the only market in the world that even puts it.
Actually, Korea is a very good example where they delayed the capital gain taxes
Exactly.
and the markets rallied like anything. Right?
Exactly.
So I think on this note, we'll conclude the podcast. Hopefully the audience loved the conversation as much as we did.
Yeah.
And we'll keep doing more of these podcasts on different topics, maybe once in every 6 months.
Sure.
That'll be a good timeline to follow and stick to. Thank you.
Bye.
Jai Hind. Bye-bye.